Good day. Welcome to the live stream. So hopefully YouTube will work well. And yeah, it's been a little while since I've had one of these. I kind of had a lack of questions, lack of content, so no reason to do a live stream with nothing on it. So hence the hiatus. But on this one, I've actually got a couple of topics I want to talk about. The first one is a question from the discussion boards. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to chuck those into the comments and I will get to those kind of as they appear / towards the end of the video. But when it comes to questions, first one came from discussion threads. And that question comes with dilution equations. So when we're doing diluting, which is taking a concentrated solution and adding solvent to it to make a less concentrated solution. And it's not necessarily just like dumping it in. It can also, quite often it's more likely, take some of the concentrated out and then put that in a container and add more solvent to it. Thus, you're diluting your solution. You're making it less concentrated. So that has the classic equation M1V1 equals M2V2 or C1V1 equals C2V2. They're the same thing. M stands for molar, C stands for concentration, and molarity is concentration. It's a type of concentration. Now with this one of the key features of it is because we're doing algebra, we're not doing dimensional analysis. So the units have to match. So the volume units have to be the same. And the concentration units have to be the same. But they don't matter what they are. So I don't have to, even if I'm using moles, I don't have to convert the volume units to liters. Because they're not actually going to be processing through and getting, if I'm using molarity, they're not going to process and use moles. They're just going to stay as molarity. So I can use milliliters if I want. I can use quarts if I want. I don't know why I would want to use quarts, but I can use quarts if I want. And the concentration unit, likewise, could be anything I want. I can use moles. I can use percents. I can also use variants of the mole. So moles, why am I calling this moles? I'm making the mistake that everyone makes. Molarity. So I can have a concentration in molarity. And with this molarity concentration, I can do, percentage, etc. But I can also use that and I can go, okay, molarity is too high. I don't have a mole per liter. I have a few tenths of a mole or a few hundredths or thousandths of a mole, in which case I don't necessarily want to use molarity. That my number is going to be too small. It's going to be 0.000 something. So instead what I can do is I can use millimolar. So in millimolar, that is 1/1000th of a mole per liter. Or I can use micromolar. That's 1/1,000,000th of a mole per liter. And so I can switch those out. And I just stick a prefix in front of the molar like I would any other unit, like if it was meters or grams, etc. But it's still molar. It's still concentration. It's moles per liter. And with dilution equation, I can use that. And I can just kind of keep on with that equation. No problem. And so I'll just keep on using the dilution equation. I can use micromolar times milliliters gives me micromolar times milliliters. And that works perfectly good. And this kind of ties into our lab that I'm doing in one of my chemistry courses. And this one, we're getting ready for the lab report. So we already did the lab. And this is one where the students took some blue food coloring, made multiple dilutions. So what we call serial dilution. So you take the stock concentration, and you do M1V1 equals M2V2 to find the concentration of the first dilution, which would be their first test tube. And then that test tube, you take the liquid out of that test tube and put it in the next one. Well, you do M1V1 equals M2V2 again. But the M1V1 is now a different M1V1. It's from whatever you move from the first test tube. And now you have M2V2 is your second test tube. Then the third test tube, you do the same thing again. However much you took out of the second one, that's going to be your M1 and your V1. And then, your third test tube. And if you wanted to call these like 3, 4, 5, and 6, you're welcome to, but it's actually makes life harder. So just go, M1V1 equals M2V2. And then these guys can be graphed. And when you're graphing, if you're using micromolar concentrations, that's your units. So on the graph, it's micromolar. which would be what? The x-axis, and absorbance would be your y-axis, because the next step on this one is to measure absorbance. And thus you can report the Gatorade concentration in micromolar. And just kind of keep on with that micromolar and just keep trucking with that thing. And there is no reason to convert that. Just kind of keep on moving. And then once you've got the Excel spreadsheet, you sort that out, you make your graph, etc. And then bada boom, bada bang, you know, you find your y equals mx plus b, and you go for it. So that hopefully works well. Once you're in kind of that pure algebra, that M1V1 equals M2V2 is a really good equation, really kind of straightforward. It's one that we use a lot. So it's definitely one that it's good that it's easy to use. Okay, so the second question, or the second topic I want to bring up, comes with one of my other classes. This is the integrated science course. So their final project, so instead of a test in that class, their final project is going to do an infographic. And so, of course, question comes up, what software to use? So, of course, an infographic is going to literally be a picture, just like you can pull off the internet, etc. There's whole bunches of infographics that's explaining a topic. And for this particular assignment, you know, it's supposed to explain a topic that we've covered, be understandable by both a child and adult, you know, have something to be learned by everyone. So it's going to go fairly into detail, but it's also not going to go into detail kind of at the same time. You know how Sesame Street talks at multiple levels? That's the goal here. And of course, that's really hard. So I know this is not a simple assignment. Okay, but how do you make it? So you got a couple of options. Honestly, the one that I would probably use is, now I've got Publisher on my computer. Now, I'm not encouraging students to go out and buy Publisher. I cannot remember what the school gives away free. And I have heard conflicting information about what the school gives away free, which is awkward. But I don't think Publisher's on the list. Now, Publisher works quite well, and I do like it. Now, there is a free alternative, and this is actually a free Office suite. So it's a competitor to Microsoft Office. It's called OpenOffice. I'm going to go ahead and actually pull this one up. So I'm going to switch so you can see my screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull up OpenOffice. Now, when you pull it up, you actually get several different things, I guess it is. One of which, text document that's competitor to MS Word, spreadsheet that's competitor to MS Excel, presentation competitor to MS PowerPoint. The one I'm actually going to pull up is drawing. I'm going to go ahead and just make this big. So drawing is kind of, it doesn't have a direct competitor in the Microsoft Office suite, probably closer to Publisher. Actually, I think it might have been closer to Front Page, which is long gone. And so with this one, you get an area that you can draw shapes with. And I'm just kind of making stuff. And this is kind of this vector graphic drawing. So you can adjust them, etc. You can add text boxes. Okay, fairly straightforward. Also, I can go to the web. Here's a random Wikipedia article. And I'll grab an image and copy the image. And I'll go back in here and I'll put it in there. And I can, wow, that's really, really big. I'm holding control. Well, no, that doesn't do anything. So I have to be careful. There it is. Yeah, so if I hold Alt, it locks the ratio so it doesn't distort it too much. And I can change the size of the image. Of course, I just randomly grabbed this random image from Wikipedia. I can do all kinds of interesting stuff, change the brightness and do some color editing with it. So this gives me a lot of tools that I can work a lot from scratch, make all kinds of interesting shapes if I want, adjust them however I'd like. So definitely some great resources, change color, etc., that I could use. And the nice part is OpenOffice is free. It's an open source software, hence the open. I believe it's now called Apache OpenOffice. It used to just be called OpenOffice, but you know how things get sold and whatnot. So definitely a useful one. Now, with this one, it's going to save in a proprietary file format, so I would have to go up and export as a PDF in order to upload that into the Learning Management System, or D2L. And then that would work fairly well. Now, OpenOffice does have a couple other software titles. So if you're wanting, say, a spreadsheet, the spreadsheet is a spreadsheet. And it's going to have different, this actually looks like the older Microsoft Office. So if you had like Microsoft Office 1997 or XP, one of the older style ones, it would look very much like this. But you can use this as a spreadsheet. It works very similar. It's just a couple of the buttons are in slightly different spots. One thing I will point out that if you are going to use the Open Office Office Suite, you want to go the first time you're using that to Tools, Options, Load Save, and then General. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to switch out the file formats it uses. Most folks aren't going to have OpenOffice, and it likes to use its own default file format setting, which of course has its advantages, but most folks are going to have the Microsoft Office file formats. So you want to change those over, and I've already done this for most of these. But change them over to the newest Microsoft Office format that you have. That way, I think that was the newest one for Microsoft PowerPoint. I don't know why it wouldn't do the newest one. But yeah, and just go ahead and then shift those over. Now, this is the drawing one, the one I showed you earlier. That doesn't have a Microsoft competitor, so that's not an option there. And same goes for this one, although I'm not for sure what Math ML is. I should know, but I don't. This one actually allows you to do like mathematical equations, etc. It's actually really, really helpful, very useful. So yeah, this is OpenOffice. Once again, very similar cousin to PowerPoint. I'm going to go ahead and switch back. And the software you saw me using is Open Broadcasting System, or OBS, a very standard streaming software. But yeah, so that's an option. If you don't have access to PowerPoint, or Microsoft Office, I should say, you can use the drawing app for OpenOffice or the presentation app as a completely free alternative. I like building a lot of those kind of infographics or kind of those display things in either, Publisher is kind of the best one for it because it's kind of what it's built for, but it's not free. And once again, I don't know what suite the students actually get. So if you don't have access to that one, PowerPoint's another good choice. It's kind of in your standard Microsoft Office suite. And you can do a lot of the same. It has a very similar feel to it. PowerPoint, of course, you're used to doing the slide, changing the slides. But you can actually go into the settings on PowerPoint and tell it just to make the slide bigger. So actually, why don't I go ahead and do that? Let me pull up PowerPoint. I'll go ahead and switch OBS back to my screen. And then I can go, trying to remember where I do this. It's been a while. Slide size, custom size, and then I can literally, if I want to make this 36 inches by, 48 inches by 36 inches. And it doesn't matter since I don't have anything in there. Boom, I've got something the size of a poster board. And this is actually how I make posters. So if you walk around a science building like Hurdy Hall on my college's campus, then you'll see a lot of these, usually this size, 4 foot by 3 foot posters. This is typically how they're built. You get into PowerPoint, and then this allows you to start doing things like inserting a table. And of course, that table is gigantic. And by the way, you can do the same thing in drawing. You can do the same thing in presentation. So OpenOffice, you can do all the same stuff. And you can insert text boxes. And you can type text. And you can change the font. By the way, that's really small font. And thus, make your poster doing that. And this is a great tool. This is how I've made most of my posters, is in PowerPoint. And then you just simply export it as a PDF. Is usually your easiest way of doing that. You can, if you know the person has PowerPoint, that works too. So it's also good. Oh, let me transition off so you're not staring at OBS. But yeah. So hopefully that gives you a couple of tools that you'll find useful when building infographics, etc. Yeah, so looking at, not seeing too often many questions in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and probably call this one a night. And with that said, have a wonderful day and enjoy your weekend. To my students who are currently taking tests, best of luck.